Zuri woke up each morning before the sun touched the roofs of Kisenda. The small city was always alive with noise, the calls of street vendors, the sound of boda-bodas passing, and the smell of roasted maize floating through the air. Her small sewing stall stood near the edge of the market, where the dust never truly settled. She worked there every day, stitching dresses and mending torn shirts for customers who sometimes forgot to pay. But she never complained. Her hands moved fast and her heart stayed patient. Her mother, Mama Kesa, was old and weak. The sickness had made her bones thin, and most days she could only sit by the window. Zuri was her only child and everything she did was for her. Every coin Zuri earned from sewing went to medicine, food, and rent for their tiny room. Some nights, when the candles burned low, Zuri would look at her mother and whisper, "One day, Mama, I will give you a better life." One afternoon, as Zuri worked on a bright blue dress, a man stopped by her stall. He was tall, fair-skinned, and wore a clean white shirt. His voice was calm and soft. "How much for that shirt?" he asked, pointing at a simple men's shirt hanging on the line. "It's 500 shillings, Zuri said with a polite smile. He handed her the money without asking for a discount, something very rare in the market. Then he nodded and said, "You sew very neatly. I'll come again." His words stayed in Zuri's mind even after he walked away. The next day he returned. This time he introduced himself. "My name is Li Wei," he said. "I work with a construction company here in Kisenda." Zuri greeted him warmly, though she felt a little shy. He watched her work for a few minutes and then bought another shirt. As days passed, Li Wei began visiting more often. He didn't always buy clothes. Sometimes he just stood near her stall and asked about her mother or her work. Zuri found him strange at first, quiet but kind. When he smiled, his eyes looked gentle, and when he spoke, it was never in a rush. Slowly she grew comfortable around him. One day he brought her a small package wrapped neatly in paper. "For you," he said. Inside was a beautiful scarf, soft as silk. Zuri gasped. "This is too much," she said. "I can't take it." But Li Wei only smiled. "You work hard every day. It's a gift, nothing more." After that, he started bringing small gifts, a necklace, fine fabric, or sometimes lunch from a restaurant. The market women began to notice and whisper among themselves. "That man likes her," they said. "He must be rich." Zuri heard the whispers but ignored them. She told herself it was just kindness. Weeks turned into months. One evening, Li Wei came to her stall just as the sun was setting. The sky burned with orange light, and the sound of drums echoed from a nearby street. He stood silently for a moment, looking at her work. Then he said softly, "Zuri, I have watched you for a long time. You are honest, humble, and strong. I want to marry you." Zuri froze, her needle still in hand. "Marry me?" she whispered. Her heart raced. "Yes," he said. "I will take care of you and your mother. You will never have to struggle again." She didn't know what to say. The idea felt unreal. A foreign man, rich, polite, and well-spoken, wanted to marry a poor tailor like her? She thought of her mother coughing in their small room, of the unpaid rent, of the days when she ate only one meal. A better life for her mother was all she had ever wanted. That night, she sat beside her mother and told her everything. Mama Kesa listened quietly, then smiled faintly. "My daughter," she said, "if this man is kind and honest, maybe he is God's answer to your prayers. But remember, money cannot feed the heart. Make sure he also gives you peace." Zuri nodded but didn't answer. Her mind was full. She thought about her life, the long days under the sun, the tired feet, the endless worry. She imagined a home with a soft bed, clean water, and no hunger. Maybe this was her chance to change everything. A week later, Zuri accepted his proposal. The wedding was simple, a small ceremony with a few friends and her mother sitting proudly in the front row. Li Wei promised to care for them both, and his eyes held a quiet sincerity. As they walked out of the church hand in hand, Zuri's heart was full of mixed feelings, hope, fear, and disbelief. She looked back once at the market where her old stall stood, half-closed and lonely. She whispered to herself, "This is the beginning of a new life." She did not know what waited ahead, but she believed she had made the right choice. In her heart, she prayed that love might grow where kindness had already taken root. Zuri's new life began with silence. When she first stepped into Li Wei's big house, her breath caught in her throat. Everything looked perfect. The marble floor that shone like glass, the walls painted in soft gold, and the sweet smell of flowers that filled the air. Servants bowed when she entered the room, and every meal came on silver plates. It was a world so different from her old one that she almost felt like she was walking in someone else's dream. The first few days passed like a blur. Zuri explored every corner of the house, the long hallway with tall mirrors, the garden filled with roses, the wide balcony that looked over the city lights. At night, she lay on the soft bed that felt too big for her alone. She could not sleep easily. She missed the sounds of crickets, the laughter of market women, and the small space she had shared with her mother. Li Wei was kind but distant. Every morning he left for work before sunrise and returned when the moon was already high. He would smile, ask if she was fine, and sometimes bring her small gifts from the city. "How was your day?" he would ask. "Quiet," Zuri would answer with a faint smile. Then he would nod, kiss her forehead, and disappear into his study with papers and his laptop. She tried to understand him, but their worlds seemed far apart. Zuri spent her days walking through the house, helping the servants cook even when they told her not to. She missed the smell of smoke from her old charcoal stove, the taste of her own cooking, the feeling of earning her food with her own hands. In this new home, everything was easy, too easy. She had no work, no customers, no reason to go out. Sometimes she would sit by the window looking down at the busy street below. She saw women carrying baskets of fruit, children running barefoot, and men selling roasted maize by the roadside. It reminded her of Kisenda Market, and her heart ached. She wanted to hear her mother's voice, to touch her sewing machine, to feel life again. One afternoon she asked Li Wei if she could visit her mother. He looked up from his laptop and said, "Of course, but only when I can come with you. I am very busy this week." Zuri nodded, but her eyes fell. Weeks passed and the visit never happened. The servants were polite but distant. They spoke in whispers, and when Zuri entered the room, they bowed slightly and moved away. None of them talked freely with her. She tried to smile, to ask about their families, but they always answered quickly and left. She began to feel like an outsider in her own home. One evening, Li Wei came home late again. Zuri waited for him with dinner already served: rice, chicken stew and vegetables. When he entered, she smiled and said softly, "I made your favorite food." He sat down, tasted it and smiled briefly. "It's good," he said. "But you don't have to cook. We have people for that." His words stung her heart more than she expected. Cooking had always been her way of showing care, her way of love. Now even that seemed unnecessary. After he went upstairs, Zuri sat alone at the table, staring at the untouched food. The silence in the house grew heavier each night. Days turned into weeks. Li Wei became busier, and Zuri became lonelier. She began to talk to herself just to hear a voice in the room. Sometimes she would stand on the balcony watching the stars. She remembered her old home, the small lamp glowing in the dark, her mother's soft laughter, and the way they used to share stories until sleep came. Now all she had was silence and comfort. The house was full of beautiful things, but her heart felt empty. One afternoon she went to the garden. The gardener, an old man named Baba Juma, was watering the flowers. Zuri sat beside him and asked, "Do you like working here?" He smiled gently. "It's work, madam. But I miss my village. The soil there feels different and people talk to each other." Zuri nodded, her eyes soft. "I miss my people too," she whispered. Baba Juma looked at her kindly. "A golden cage is still a cage," he said quietly. His words stayed in her mind. That night, Zuri sat by the window watching the stars. She thought about everything: her mother's weak smile, her market friends, her sewing machine, her laughter that had slowly faded. She had dreamed of comfort and she had found it. But comfort without warmth felt cold. When Li Wei finally came home that night, he found her still awake. "Why aren't you sleeping?" he asked. "I was thinking," she said softly. "About what?" "About how I wanted comfort but I forgot what peace feels like." Li Wei looked at her for a long time but said nothing. He didn't understand what she truly meant. When he turned away, Zuri kept looking out the window, her heart heavy but awake. Somewhere deep inside she began to realize that what she truly missed was not money or fine things. It was life, laughter and love. Zuri woke up that morning feeling heavier than usual. The sun shone through the white curtains but its light felt dull. The big house was quiet as always. No laughter, no music, no footsteps except those of the servants walking softly through the hall. She sat by the window watching the world outside the gate move without her. The cars passed, the wind blew dust across the street, and far away she could hear people talking and laughing. Her heart ached for something simple: a sound, a smell, a piece of home. After breakfast, she wandered through the halls with no purpose. Every room was clean and perfect but lifeless. She passed by the kitchen where the cook prepared lunch and smiled weakly before stepping outside. The back door opened into a part of the house she had never explored before: the garden. A warm breeze brushed against her skin as she stepped outside. The sound of birds filled the air. She followed a stone path between tall green bushes, her hands brushing against the leaves. It was quiet and peaceful, and for the first time in weeks she felt calm. The further she walked, the more curious she became. Then she saw it and stopped. Right in front of her was a small patch of flowers that looked strikingly familiar. Bright red hibiscus swayed in the breeze, just like the ones her mother used to grow by their door. Yellow sunflowers turned toward the sunlight, tall and proud. Wild roses crept along the fence just as they did back in Kisenda. Zuri's breath caught in her throat. She stepped closer, kneeling down to touch a hibiscus petal. The soft red bloom felt warm against her fingers. Her eyes began to sting and she blinked back tears. How could these flowers, her flowers, be here? Her eyes moved to a small wooden sign standing at the center of the garden. The words written on it were simple but powerful. For Zuri, so you never forget home. Her hand flew to her mouth and a quiet sob escaped her. She stood there for a long time just looking at those words. Memories flooded her heart. Her mother's gentle laughter, the smell of earth after rain, the way she used to hum while watering her plants. Zuri could almost hear her mother's voice saying, "Home is where love grows." She didn't hear Li Wei's footsteps until he was standing behind her. When she turned, her eyes were full of tears. "You planted these?" she asked softly. Li Wei nodded, a small smile on his face. "Yes. I saw how much you missed your home," he said. "You looked sad every time you talked about Kisenda. I wanted you to have a piece of it here." For a moment, Zuri couldn't speak. The air felt thick with emotion. She looked at him, really looked at him. The man who had seemed so quiet, so distant, had noticed her pain more than she realized. She walked closer to him, her voice trembling. "You did all this for me?" Li Wei nodded again. "I wanted you to smile again. I know this city is not easy for you. I wanted to make it softer." Zuri's heart began to fill with warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. She had thought he didn't care. She had thought he only worked, only gave her money, only provided comfort without love. But now she saw, his love was quiet, patient, and thoughtful. He didn't speak much, but he showed care in the small things. She turned back to the flowers and smiled through her tears. "These are the same flowers my mother grows," she said. Li Wei's eyes softened. "I asked the gardener to find out what flowers were common in Kisenda. He searched for weeks. I didn't want to get it wrong." Zuri laughed softly, wiping her eyes. "You didn't get it wrong," she said. "You got everything right." They walked together through the garden. The air smelled of flowers and earth, and for the first time, Zuri felt truly at peace. She touched the petals, showing him each one, telling him their names and the stories her mother used to tell about them. Li Wei listened quietly, smiling whenever she laughed. Under the tall sunflowers, Zuri stopped and looked at him again. "You know," she said softly, "I thought you didn't understand me." "I don't always understand words," Li Wei said gently, "but I understand feelings." Zuri's heart trembled at those words. It was the first time he had spoken so honestly. They sat on the stone bench at the edge of the garden. The silence between them was no longer heavy, it felt warm like the sun on their faces. Zuri told him stories of her childhood, how her mother used to sell vegetables, how she learned to sew, how the smell of hibiscus meant the start of the rainy season. Li Wei listened to every word, his eyes kind and patient. For the first time since she left her village, Zuri felt seen. She realized that Li Wei's love was not the loud kind. He didn't speak much or shower her with words, but his actions carried deep meaning. As the evening came, the garden began to glow with the soft orange light of sunset. The flowers looked even more beautiful, their colors deep and rich. Zuri leaned back, breathing in the air. "This place feels like home now," she said quietly. Li Wei smiled. "That's what I hoped." She turned to him, her voice soft but strong. "Thank you, Li Wei." He looked at her for a moment, then said gently, "You once said you wanted peace. Maybe it was never gone. It was just waiting for you to see it." Zuri smiled. The words sank deep into her heart. She realized that sometimes, love doesn't come with loud promises or expensive gifts. Sometimes it grows slowly, like flowers in a quiet garden. From that day, Zuri visited the garden every morning. She watered the plants herself, humming softly as she worked. The servants began to see her differently, not as a rich man's wife, but as someone gentle and kind. Li Wei often joined her in the evenings, and they would sit together, watching the flowers bloom under the fading sun. Zuri still missed her mother and her village, but now she no longer felt trapped. The house no longer felt like a cage. It had life, warmth, and meaning. Every time she looked at the wooden sign, "For Zuri, so you never forget home," she smiled and whispered, "I won't." Zuri's life began to feel lighter as the days passed. The quiet house that once made her lonely started to feel alive with laughter, smells of food, and the soft sound of music. Every morning, sunlight poured into the kitchen, and for the first time since her marriage, Zuri enjoyed waking up early. She began cooking again, not because she had to but because it brought her joy. One day she decided to make Li Wei a special meal from her village, spicy beef stew with roasted maize and fried plantains. The rich smell filled the kitchen, and when Li Wei came home from work, his eyes widened with curiosity. "What is this?" he asked, smiling as he looked at the table full of steaming dishes. "It's home," Zuri said proudly. "My mother used to cook this every Sunday." Li Wei sat down and she served him a plate. He took a bite of the stew and his eyes grew wide. "Spicy," he said laughing. "But very good." Zuri giggled. "That's how we like it. You have to eat slowly." He tried again and soon they were both laughing. Him because the food was hot, and her because his reaction reminded her of home. For the first time they shared something beyond words. It was a simple meal but it was filled with warmth. Later that week, Li Wei surprised her by inviting her into the kitchen. "Today I cook," he said, smiling proudly. Zuri crossed her arms and laughed. "We'll see." He took out flour, vegetables, and meat, and began to show her how to make dumplings. His movements were careful and patient. Zuri tried to copy him but made her dumplings too big. He laughed softly and helped her fold one properly. "Like this?" he said, guiding her hands. Zuri blushed slightly. "Yours look perfect," she said. "Because I've made them all my life," Li Wei replied. "Now it's your turn to learn." They spent the afternoon cooking together, teasing each other about their food. When they finally sat down to eat, their dumplings were uneven in shape, but the taste made them smile. It wasn't just the food that mattered, it was the feeling of being together, learning, sharing, and finding joy in simple things. At night, Li Wei began teaching her how to write her name in Chinese. He wrote the characters slowly on a piece of paper, his handwriting neat and graceful. "This means Zuri," he said. "It sounds the same but looks different." Zuri tried to copy the symbols but her lines were crooked. "It looks like a chicken walked over it," she said laughing. Li Wei chuckled. "It's beautiful," he said softly. "Because it's yours." Zuri looked at him, surprised. The gentle warmth in his eyes made her heart skip. For the first time she saw him not as a man who had rescued her from poverty, but as someone who truly cared for her. Weeks later, Zuri decided to visit her mother in Kisenda. When she told Li Wei, he didn't hesitate. "I'll go with you," he said. She was surprised. "You will? The village is small and the journey is long." He smiled. "If it is your home, then I want to see it." They traveled together by bus and then on foot through the dusty road that led to her village. When they arrived, children ran behind them, curious about the tall foreign man walking beside Zuri. Her mother stood at the door, her eyes filling with tears when she saw her daughter. "Zuri, my child," she said, hugging her tightly. Li Wei stood back politely, smiling. Then he stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Mother," he said softly. "Thank you for raising such a strong woman." Her mother's eyes widened with surprise. She didn't understand every word but she felt his respect. "You are welcome," she said kindly. That evening, Zuri cooked with her mother while Li Wei helped fix the broken roof and mend the fence. The villagers watched in quiet amazement. They had heard stories, that Zuri had married a foreign man, that she now lived in a big house in the city. Many had imagined him proud or cold. But what they saw was a humble man working with his hands, smiling as he shared a meal with them. The children gathered around him as he showed them how to fold paper cranes. He laughed when they tried to copy him, their little fingers fumbling with the paper. Soon, the small yard was full of laughter and tiny paper birds fluttering in the wind. Zuri watched from the doorway, her heart swelling with pride. She saw how gently he spoke to her mother, how patiently he explained things to the children. In that moment she realized that kindness needed no language. That night, after everyone had eaten, her mother sat by the fire, smiling. "He is a good man, Zuri," she said softly. "I can see it in his eyes. You married for comfort but maybe you found love too." Zuri felt tears gather in her eyes. She looked at Li Wei sitting nearby, helping one of the boys fold another paper crane. His face glowed softly in the firelight, calm and kind. She whispered, "Maybe I did." The next morning as they prepared to leave, the villagers gathered to say goodbye. One old man stepped forward and said, "You have brought honor to this village, Zuri. You left for a better life, but you did not forget where you came from. Zuri smiled and nodded. Home will always be in my heart. When they returned to the city, everything felt different. The house no longer felt empty or strange. The rooms were filled with warmth, laughter, and shared memories. Zuri continued to cook her village food, and sometimes Li Wei cooked his. Together they created a mix of flavors, a blend of Africa and China, of love and respect. Each morning they walked in the garden where the hibiscus bloomed bright under the sun. Zuri would stop and pick one, placing it in Li Wei's pocket. "To remind you of Kisenda," she would say. "And you," he would reply, smiling, "remind me of home too." They were two souls from different worlds, but somehow, their hearts spoke the same language, one made of kindness, patience, and quiet love. Months had passed since Zuri and Li Wei's visit to the village, and life had taken a new turn for them both. Zuri had grown stronger, more confident, and full of ideas. She no longer saw herself as a woman who had married for comfort, but as someone who had built her own story from courage and kindness. One morning as they sat together in the garden, Zuri said softly, "I want to do something for my people, for the women who wake up before sunrise, who cook by the roadside like I used to." Li Wei listened carefully. He had always admired how her heart reached out to others. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I want to open a small restaurant in Kisenda," she said with a smile. "Not a fancy one, just a place where people can eat good food and feel at home. I want to teach young girls to cook too so they can earn a living." Li Wei thought for a moment, then nodded. "Then we will build it together," he said. And that was how it began. They returned to Kisenda, and the whole village gathered to help. Some brought wood, others brought bricks, and the young men helped build the kitchen walls. Zuri worked side by side with them, her hands covered in dust but her heart full of joy. Li Wei helped too, lifting heavy stones, sketching out the layout of the restaurant and laughing with the workers. After weeks of hard work, the small restaurant stood proudly in the center of the village. The walls were painted warm yellow, and the sign above the door read, "Two Hearts Kitchen." Zuri had chosen the name herself, two hearts from different worlds, beating together in one dream. On the day of the grand opening, the smell of food filled the air. Zuri cooked her best African dishes, spiced rice, grilled tilapia, and fried plantains, while Li Wei prepared noodles and dumplings. The mixture of aromas was like a song, one that carried across the whole village. Children peeked through the windows, their eyes wide with excitement. Old women sat under the shade of the trees, smiling proudly. When Zuri finally opened the doors, people rushed in, laughing and clapping. Every table was filled, and soon the sound of spoons and laughter filled the small building. One man said between bites, "This stew tastes like home." Another said, "These noodles are soft like stories from far away." Zuri moved from table to table, greeting people warmly. Her mother sat near the door, tears of joy in her eyes. "You have made me proud, my child," she whispered when Zuri came to her. "You turned your pain into something beautiful." Li Wei smiled from across the room, watching her with quiet pride. He had seen her journey, from the roadside cook with tired hands to the confident woman leading a restaurant full of laughter. He walked over and said softly, "You did this, Zuri? You brought your two worlds together." She looked at him and smiled. "No," she said. "We did this." As the sun began to set, golden light filled the restaurant. Zuri stood outside for a moment, watching the children play and the villagers eat happily. She thought about her past, the small stall by the market, the long nights worrying about her mother, and the day she first met Li Wei when he was just a tired traveler in dusty clothes. She smiled softly. Life had taken her on a path she never expected. She had once said yes for comfort, not love. But now she understood that true comfort came from kindness, respect, and shared laughter. In the following weeks, Two Hearts Kitchen became the heart of Kisenda. Travelers stopped by to eat and hear the story behind it, the story of a village girl who married a foreign man and built something beautiful out of two different worlds. Zuri hired young women from the village and taught them how to cook, just as she had once dreamed. "Your hands can create more than food," she would tell them. "They can create a future." Li Wei helped teach them how to keep accounts and manage money. The girls laughed as they learned, and every day the small restaurant became a place of hope. People began to call Zuri Mama Hearts, and whenever someone asked her how she had achieved so much, she would smile and say, "I married for comfort but found love and kindness." One evening, as she and Li Wei sat outside the restaurant watching the lanterns glow in the dark, Zuri looked at him and said, "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" Li Wei nodded. "Every day. You changed my life, Zuri. I came here to do business, but I found something much greater, a home." Zuri rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the calm breeze. If only I knew where my choice would take me, she whispered, smiling. I would still choose it, just with an open heart. The stars shone above them, and in that peaceful moment, Zuri felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, complete peace. She had everything she needed: love, purpose, and the warmth of a home she had built with her own hands. From then on, every traveler who visited Two Hearts' kitchen left not just with a full stomach, but with a full heart. They carried the story of Zuri and Li Wei wherever they went. A story of how kindness could cross oceans, how love could grow from the smallest seed, and how two hearts, no matter how different, could beat as one.